So when I was asked to come speak today, I was trying to debate what should I talk about. And the first thing I was thinking about is Redbox. How many people here know Redbox? Yeah, thank you. We really appreciate that. And I was heading up innovation for Redbox, and I could talk about best practices of innovation. And I also last year was, for most of the year, was the chief marketing officer, and I could talk about how Redbox became a Ad Age top 25 brand. But that just seemed too corporate and not personal and not a great story for this audience. So then I started thinking about, I've been spending a lot of time talking about corporate values and culture. And I believe with all my heart that those companies that have values, and more importantly, a culture that reinforces those values, deliver better shareholder results. And here we are in the house that Tony built. And I thought, what could I add to that? So in the spirit of personal storytelling, I started thinking back through my career and the different companies that I started and built. My first company did okay-ish. We'll talk a little bit about it. My second company was an abject failure. And my third and fourth companies did really well. And then, of course, as a venture capitalist, I invested in many companies, and I sit on a lot of boards. And I had a front row seat and the privilege of working with some incredibly, really bright and smart people who worked really hard. And as I looked through all those different companies throughout my career, I started thinking about the role that timing and luck had, because obviously we all work hard. So let's see if this works. No, there we go. One more. Okay, so you probably can't see that picture, but underneath the stack of crackers is a little ant. So it's a given. We all have to work hard. I can't tell you how many companies I've participated in or seen where people work really, really hard. They're wickedly smart. They build great products, and they don't always succeed. And for me, I was a very lazy hard worker. And what I mean by that is when I was a student, both at high school and college, if an A was 90%, I got exactly 90%. Right? I did the least amount possible. And I always had a job. So the proverbial paper boy as a kid, and then I always had a job in high school, and I had to pay for a lot of my college education. And I always had 2 or 3 jobs at college. And I was the guy if closing time was 5 o'clock, at 4:45, I had everything already buttoned up, and I was out the door at 5. I did just enough. And I kind of skated by. And I went on in my career. I graduated school, and a couple years later, I was really lucky to get a job at Apple. And I was at Apple in 1983, so I'm an old fart. And I was there. I was hired to be the Apple IIc introduction manager. And it was an incredible job. And I had this boss who was this tiny little 4'9" New York Jewish woman, and whatever you think of as a stereotype of that person, that's who she was. She was wicked smart. I loved her to pieces. She was a great boss and tough as nails. And the first 2 weeks go by, and my first assignment, my first real milestone is due, and I miss it. And this became my catalyst moment. So my boss called me into her office. She looked me in the eye, and she said, "Mark, we love you. You're smart. But if you miss another deadline, I'm firing your ass." And my whole system went into shock, because nobody ever talked to me that way before. Nobody ever cared enough to really challenge me and push me. And my wife, we had just gotten married. We've been married now 31 years. And she didn't like, we had moved to California. She wasn't happy in California. I don't know why. But so what I would do is I started going to work, meet wherever you are. For me, my framework was I started going to work at 4 in the morning. So I was the opposite of you, right? Just as you were going to sleep. And I'd go to work at 4 in the morning, so I'd be home at 6 so I could be with my wife in the evening. But whatever that gene was, that hard work gene, that gene that just said, I have to kick it up a whole nother notch, a whole nother gear. That's what I did. And so, as I start to think through where does luck and timing play into it, let's just take hard work off the table. So this is interesting. So we all know that entrepreneurs have to be persistent. So incredible persistence is absolutely mandatory. But persistence without empathy is kind of like a mental illness, right? So let me give you an example of what I mean by that. So my first company, so you're going to like this. My first company, we built, I met my partner who was a programmer, and it took him a year to write the software. And what I did is I went to work, he stayed at home and wrote the software, and I gave him half my salary. Yes. You should. I got the triple play from my wife. When I went and told her that, not only did I get the eye roll and the eye flutter, I also got the hand. Right. It's just like, what are you thinking? But I did it, and he wrote the software, and a year went by. It was time to launch the company. So we raised $200,000. And I apologize for using numbers, but we had $27,000 in the bank, and I put in 25 of the 27. Once again, my wife was really happy about that. I pushed all the chips in, and my partner did the same, and we raised $50,000 from a local seed fund, and we raised $50,000 from the state of Illinois in a grant. And I went to my local bank, and I said, I'm 27, I'm starting a new business. This is in 1986 when nobody ever heard the word entrepreneur. I went, hi, here I am. Can I have my money, please? And the banker just looked at me, right? You have no collateral. You have no assets. Of course, they just laughed me out the bank. But this is where empathy comes in. So I didn't take no for an answer. So I decided I want to put myself in their shoes. So I learned how a bank operated. I went and I interviewed the banker, and I said, well, how do you make decisions? What's your decision criteria? And I learned they needed a business plan. So I wrote a 100-page business plan. And I found out there was a loan committee, and I interviewed each member of the loan committee. And by the time I was done, they just couldn't wait to get rid of me. But they gave me the loan. I got it. And I did the same thing when I was trying to raise venture capital. So empathy is incredibly important, putting yourself in the other person's shoes and understanding how they think and why they think that way. So you can't manage outcomes. I'm going to tell you a quick story. So that company, we built it up. 7 years go by. We got to about $6 million in revenue, which is purgatory for venture capitalists because it was good, it was profitable, but it wasn't good enough, and it wasn't going to scale, and it wasn't going to have a big exit. And so it was time to sell the company. We sell the company to Symantec, all is well. Maybe. So when we sold the company, we sold it for stock, and there was a 3-month lockup. Well, at that time, as luck would have it, the CEO of Symantec hired a VP of programming, and that VP of programming was sending him emails from another company about their business, and it leaked. And the CEO of Symantec almost went to jail. Well, during this 3-month time period, when I couldn't sell my stock, I saw the Symantec stock go from $48 per share to $6 per share. Oh. My wife and I were looking for our first house, and during that 3-month period, and first we're looking here, then we're looking here, then we're looking here. So after 7 years of incredible hard work, not a whole lot. So you can't manage outcomes. So let's talk about positioning. So that first company, the Whitewater Group, it was really interesting because we built an object-oriented programming language, and I came from a PC background, and I thought of it as I had that framework of being a PC guy. And so we packaged it up. We sold it for $500 a piece. And that's how we went to market. A couple years later, another company with basically the exact same product sold it as an enterprise solution to helping large corporations create access to Windows PC, desktop PC, Windows-based solution. And they sold it for $1,000 per year per license and turned it into a $100 million a year company. Same product, basically. Just positions a little bit differently. My next company was a CD-ROM software company. I wanted to create educational kids software. My wife famously said, this is in 1992, when CD-ROMs first came out, and she said, this is going to fail. It did. Because nobody we know had a PC at home. It's true, in 1992, very few people had PCs at home. So timing actually mattered. Because by 2 years later, everybody had a PC at home. But right then, nobody did. My next company, I had this genius engineer who figured out how to move the bits around the screen fast enough to play scrolling action arcade games under Windows. Now, this is where we took our time and really was thoughtful about how we positioned it. We could have, with that technology, we could have created original games. Or we could have created a consulting shop. What we did is we created a platform as a bridge between these two multi-billion-dollar marketplaces. So positioning matters. So never stop being creative. Excuse the double negative. I'll tell you an interesting story about that company. We were trying to get the CEOs of game companies to pay attention to us. And we sent them email. Nobody responded. There were 81 different game companies at the time. We called them. Nobody responded. So you know what we did? We created a wedding invitation. Really. It was on beautiful paper. It was hand calligraphy. It looked exactly like a wedding invitation. And even the outside, the envelope looked like a wedding invitation. We announced the marriage between Windows and Sega Nintendo games. And the ask was a meeting at E3. This was the very first E3. And guess what? We got 81. So we sent it to 81 people, 81 CEOs. We got 71 meetings. Right? So creativity. And by the way, customer acquisition is the hardest thing to do. When I talk to entrepreneurs, and I talk to entrepreneurs almost every day, they always say they have a great product, they have great domain expertise, you know your industry. The one thing that most entrepreneurs really fail to focus on is sales, is customer acquisition, however you define that. So I like this slide. I want to know what's in his brain, right? He's probably looking at going, I got this. So I'm running out of time. I'm sorry I'm rushing this. But the good news at the end of the story here is that that company, we were able to create, in 9 months, we sold that company we started it in August, we sold it in May, and we were able to get a bidding war first between Intel and then Sega, and then IBM came and made a much larger offer for us, all within the span of 6 weeks. And we're about to do the deal with IBM when we got a phone call from Japan. And it turns out that a few weeks before, Bill Gates had gotten together with Masayoshi Son, the CEO of SoftBank, and they decided that the gaming marketplace was really important, and they were going to create a new game company for PCs, for Microsoft Windows. And Bill Gates said to Son, well, that's a great idea, let's do it, but boy, you got to work with these guys. These are the pros, unbeknownst to me. So I'm at E3, we're about to sign the deal, and our lawyer's actually in New York with our signature pages. And talk about luck and timing. The lawyers for IBM started messing with some of the deal terms at the very end. Not egregious enough to kill the deal, but you know, just big companies messing with little companies. And they were bad enough to give me a pause. At that exact moment, I get a phone call from Tokyo. Son wants to see you. I said, I can't. I'm at E3. I'm about to sign the deal with IBM. We know all about that. You have to come to Tokyo. We'll make it worth your while. I said, okay. So I call my wife. Now you gotta understand, I put my wife through hell. Right? And my wife, this was like our moment, right? And my wife said, is it done? Is the IBM deal done? Did you get done? And I said, well, no. No, and in fact, I'm coming home because I'm grabbing my passport and I'm going to Tokyo. And my wife literally went through the phone, grabbed me by the collar, and she said, don't you mess this up. I don't know about you guys. In my house, I'm right about once every 6 months. And you know, we have to stop and we celebrate it. And I have to, did you just say I was right? But so I went to Tokyo, and I'm sitting and we're sitting with Sun, and my partner and I, and he turns to us and says, so what do you want? And I look at my partner looks at me, and I said, number 4x what IBM had. And Sun said, okay. Okay. So I'm out of time, but basically my message is we all have to work hard. We have to kick it into that extra gear. But you know, and we have to put ourselves in a position to be lucky. We have to put ourselves in a position where if the timing does work, that we could take advantage of it, and we have to execute flawlessly. But I think that we all have to recognize and appreciate that there is something to luck and timing. And so my last thing here is I always think of the salmon. So think of that salmon, you know, surviving out in the ocean, you know, ducking predators, going upstream tens of miles, hundreds of miles, going up that waterfall to that, right? And if you just moved a little to the left or a little to the right, right? So luck and timing plays a role. Thank you.